Okay, review very quickly. We asked the question, what is this going on with Am Yisrael that they're being judged from morning till evening? They have food, they have water, they have clothing, they have property, they have protection, they have money, they have everything they need. So part number one is that there was always cases because Am Yisrael had disputes about we got there first, but we deserve to split equally. Socialism versus capitalism, which one should win? And that was a lot of the disputes, but more so than that, even before, we know that all of Am Yisrael collected gold and silver from the Egyptians. Now, it says in the Torah that everybody, Vayishalu ish me'et re'eu v'isha me'et re'uta, every man and every woman collected and essentially borrowed, it says, gold and silver and clothing from the Egyptians. Now, there was a subset of Egyptians that left with Am Yisrael when they left Mitzrayim. And that was, of course, who was that? Erev Rav. The Erev Rav were Egyptians that decided to become Geret Tzedek, to convert. Now, their conversion obviously was not on very high levels. They lived through Egypt, they saw the Makot, they were afraid. But at the end of the day, they decided, we're going to join into the Jewish people. Now, all of those Egyptians, they were essentially 100% Egyptian, except they converted to being part of Am Yisrael. So when the Jews left Mitzrayim and they saw that all of the Egyptians were killed, and they were borrowing their gold and silver, they said, we want to borrow it for 3 days and then we'll come and return it. Now the Egyptians ran after the Jewish people, they were wiped out. So the Erev Rav come before Moshe Rabbeinu and they say all of the gold and all of the silver that all of Am Yisrael is owes to the Egyptians belongs to us because we are the inheritors. We, the Erev Rav, are the Egyptians that inherit that which all the other Egyptians that died really deserve to get back. So everything that's the gold and the silver that they have, all the Jews that left with Mitzrayim with so much gold and silver, belongs to us. And they come before Moshe, each individual, making the claim against this Jew and against that Jew, because he's my relative and he's my relative. And Moshe Rabbeinu had to handle these cases. Now it comes out pretty incredible, because essentially everybody in Am Yisrael was pasul, was unable to judge the case except for Moshe. Since it says in the Torah that every single Jew collected gold and silver, that means that they're all nogea bedavar. They're biased because they're all part of the question that's at hand. The only person that's able to judge the case and has to be the one to judge the case is Moshe Rabbeinu, because he was the only one the Torah testifies, Chacham Levi Kach Mitzvot, that he was wise, and he says, I don't want to touch the gold and the silver, I'm not going to borrow, I'm not going to take, I'm just going to deal with the mitzvah of the bones of Yosef. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was equipped to judge this case, which answers another question, because the pasuk says, Chacham Lev, a person who's wise in his heart, Yikach, he should take, what does it say? What's the next word? Mitzvot. Tell me, mitzvot means commands in the singular or in the plural? Plural. Which mitzvot did Moshe Rabbeinu take? He only took one mitzvah. He took the bones of Yosef. Why does it say Chacham Levi Kach mitzvot in the plural when he really only took one mitzvah that Am Yisrael didn't take? He took the bones, they took the gold and the silver. So Chacham Levi Kach mitzvah. Is the pshat is Moshe Rabbeinu took 2 mitzvot. Mitzvah number 1 was taking the bones of Yosef. And what's mitzvah number 2? Judging. He didn't take money. He was the one that was the only one, by taking the bones of Yosef and not taking the money, he was the only one qualified to judge Am Yisrael. And what do you think that is? A mitzvah. He was able to be zocheh in the mitzvah of being uniquely qualified to be the judge of Am Yisrael. So it comes out, kaftov aferach, how beautiful it is that Am Yisrael had debates on this question, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that was able to resolve it. Now the Noam Elimelech says a very nice idea, something that we're familiar with. Everybody has heard the expression, Ke'ish ehad belev ehad. What does that expression mean? That all of Am Yisrael Ke'ish ehad means they were like one person with lev ehad, one heart. How do we know that Am Yisrael was like one person, one entity? So it says, Vayihan Sham Yisrael neged Dahar. That Am Yisrael stood by Har Sinai. It says in the singular, Vayihan, that he camped by the mountain. Now who's he? It was all of Am Yisrael. So says Rashi, if it uses the singular to describe the plural, that means that all of Am Yisrael was completely unified. And just parenthetically, we learn out from that, in order to receive the Torah, it is a prerequisite for Am Yisrael to be unified. Just like in the times, which is coming up, the times of Mordechai ve'Esther. Am Yisrael kiyemu ve'kibbelu ha'Yehudim alehem ve'al atzmam. They re-received the Torah. What they received on Har Sinai out of fear and trepidation, they received on Purim of love and ahava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it say over there? Mishloach manot ish lere'eu. Am Yisrael was in the highest level of unity. Before they were able to receive the Torah, you need to have unity. And in general, this is a true precursor to anything, a person in his own home. If he wants to excel in Torah, there isn't a way to excel in Torah effectively if there isn't shalom in the home, between the children and the parents, between the husband and the wife, between the family distant and the family that's close. There has to be shalom. It is a precursor for there to be a proper ability for the Shekhinah to reside in the individual. And that's something that the Torah stresses. However, you would think, if I were to ask you, is this a unique characteristic of Am Yisrael? I would assume most people would say it has to be. Only Am Yisrael has that kind of level of achdut. Yet the Noam Elimelech asks a very, very important question over here. He says, if you look carefully, it says that Am Yisrael, before they entered into the water, I'll look for it, 1 second, this Parashat Bishalach, last week's Parasha, it tells us, Ufar'o ikriv. Paro gets close to Am Yisrael as they're right by the water. Vayis'u v'nei Yisrael et enehem. Vehine Mitzrayim nosea acharehem. What does the word nosea mean? It means they're driving, they're traveling. Singular or plural? Singular. Nosea is one person. If we wanted to say plural, would have said noseim acharehim. They're traveling in the plural. It says nosea. Says Rashi, nosea, the Egyptians are on the tail of the Jewish people. Belev echad keish echad. Here we see the Egyptians are also unified. So you see, it's not unique to Am Yisrael. Rashi over here said, Vayihan Sham Yisrael keish echad belev echad. And here the Egyptians also nosea harem belev echad keish echad. Except there's a big difference. And this difference, if one is careful and sensitive to the language of the Rashi, you'll notice a very glaring difference. Here Rashi says, by Am Yisrael ki ish echad belev echad. One man, one heart. And by Egyptians it says, belev echad ki ish echad. It flips it. One heart, one man. Now, I don't know, I would have just said whatever, it doesn't make a difference. But the Noam Elimelech picks up and he says, Jews are very different. Am Yisrael thinks differently. We think not with our heart, we think with our mind. We say what is right, and based on what is right is the message we send to our heart to choose. And that is the idea that the tzaddikim, a person who's righteous, libam birshutam, the heart is in their possession. And always by the tzaddikim, you'll notice the expression, vaydaber al libam. You speak to the heart, and not in the heart, because the mind speaks to the heart and tells the heart what it needs to feel and what it needs to do. The mind comes first. What is right? Then I will define what my heart is going to want. A person sees a girl and he wants to date her, and he sees that, you know what, she might have a lot of money, she might come a very famous family, but she doesn't have the midot. His heart says, well, you should still get married to her. What do you mean? She has beauty, she has fame, she has fortune, she has... But you're saying, the mind says, wait a second, but where are the midot? Where's the derech eretz? Where's the proper hashkafot, the proper outlooks? She doesn't have, the mind tells the heart. The tzaddik says, the mind tells the heart that, nope, not for me. I'm going to go elsewhere. Because who's in charge? The mind is in charge. The Rishaim, the opposite. The heart dictates to the mind. Vayomer Haman bilibo. Haman speaks in his heart and tells himself what the heart says is what guides him. So with Am Yisrael, the way Achdut works is we say, Ki'ish Echad. First, the mind dictates, we need to be together. And then the heart follows suit, and the unity comes from the mind and the idea that we must be together no matter what, and then there's a unity. We don't need to find something that is in common. The mere fact that the Am Yisrael has to be b'achdut dictates the achdut. As opposed to the goyim, it's the other way around. When there's a goal, then there's unification around that goal. But it's not an inherent unification. It's we have common enemies, we'll unify. Just like it says, Moab and Midian were enemies of each other, but they unified in order to defeat Am Yisrael. Or we have the entire United Nations in our times, where you have hundreds of nations, and they all hate each other. But when it comes to Am Yisrael, all of a sudden everything is unanimous. Condemnations and sanctions and everything else is unanimous. Why? We don't actually care for each other. But when it comes to having a common purpose and mission, then we're going to be belev echad keish echad. The heart, which dictates and creates the tone, is going to cause an artificial version of ahdut. Where does this play out? Let's go rewind a little bit. If you look carefully, we have Parashat Vayishlach. And in this parasha, it says some things that if you're not really sensitive to the language, you might miss. It says, Vayashuvu ha-mal'achim el Yaakov lemor. The mal'achim return to Yaakov. The messengers come back to Yaakov as he sent, of course, a message to Esav that he was in the house of Lavan and he wants to give him a gift and he has a present and the whole message. And they come back to report, Banu el achicha el Esav. We came to your brother Esav. V'gam holech likratecha. Listen to the words. Who can finish it? V'gam holech likratecha. Ve'arba meot. Ish imo. What does it mean, ish? Ish is man in the singular. It doesn't say arba meot anashim ito. It says arba meot ish. Now Yaakov Avinu hears the message and he hears it clear. He says 400 men that are unified, not just men that are unified. So once Yaakov Avinu hears that it's Arba Mod, not just 400, Ish Imo, 400 with one intent and one purpose and one mission to destroy me. Vayira Yaakov Meod. Yaakov Avinu becomes afraid. Vayetzelo. So listen to what Yaakov Avinu brilliantly does. Vayachatz et ha'am asher ito. Yaakov Avinu says, how do I dissolve this achdut? So Yaakov Avinu knew the Noam Elimelech. He understood that the unity of the Goyim is on its surface level, is superficial because of a common goal, and something that's superficial and not embedded and inherent is easily broken. Says Yaakov, I'll do something simple. Vayachatz, next pasuk, Rabotai. Vayachatz et ha'am asher ito. Yaakov Avinu splits his camp. Now, why does he split his camp? Very simple. If he splits his camp, what do you think Esav is going to do? Esav is going to split his camp. Now, when Esav splits his camp, now there's politics. Who's going to lead this group? Who's going to lead that group? Who's going to be in charge? Which group is better than the other group? How are we going to break it up? Says Yaakov, I'm going to cause it that their unity will be disunified because of the fact that now they're going to have to split and it's going to be about their own personal honor, their own personal kavod, and that way he will be able to defeat the unity of Esav. This is the brilliance of the thought process of Yaakov Avinu, was to be able to be perceptive and pick up that it's very simple to disband such a unity. And what it teaches us in our own lives is that we really have to check ourselves. You know, sometimes in life, we say we're unified. I see this with young couples. You know, sometimes you have people that are dating. Dating is common. And they think that they're the most unified couple in the world. Why? Because belev echad ki ish echad. There's sort of the heart is merging, and therefore a lot of the things that the mind would have said, no, this is not really mat'im, it's not a good idea, these aren't common values, we're not in the right place. No, everything is together, they're in love and in all of this romance and everything else. And then all of a sudden reality sets in. What we have to make sure to do in life, and this is not just about people that are dating, but people that are in marriage, we have to reorient our mentality that our unity is not based on something that is on the surface. The unity has to be based on something that's much more it's important to be unified because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the unity. And even if the default is there's nothing to be unified about, there's no reason that we should be unified, we don't have things in common. No, but the Torah wants the unity. But the right thing to do is for us to be b'achdut and b'shalom. You don't need a positive reason in order to be unified, so that it's negated, so all of a sudden there's disunity. And this is how you see the difference between people that get along and people that don't get along. When I have a difference with my wife, what's going to be the reaction? If the whole reason of the unity is because, oh look, we had all these wonderful things in common, and now there's a disunity in that, all of a sudden the lev echad is broken up, so then the ish echad is broken up. But if it was always the other way, it was always the intellect enforcing the idea of achdut, so then the lev echad always remains because it's constantly being fueled by the ish echad. And that's a really important principle, that we have to put values before self-interest. And when the values dictate the interest, then shalom is very much possible and achdut is likely, even if it might not suit me personally. So that's point number one that I think is very valuable. But I want to move on to something else in the parasha, and that is something that a little bit is not so intuitive, why HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it this way. So the pasuk says as follows: Moshe ala el Elohim. Moshe goes up to the mountain. This is about to be the giving. The giving of Torah has just started. This is what we read on Shavuot. The first Aliyah has these Pesukim where Moshe Rabbeinu is preparing and right about to receive the Torah. So he goes up to the mountain, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls to him from the mountain, and he tells him to say over to Am Yisrael, Kotoma levet Yaakov etaged ibnei Yisrael. He commands Moshe Rabbeinu on two groups, the women and the men. Who is commanded first and who is commanded second? It says, Kotomar lebet Yaakov, betaged ibnei Yisrael. Bet Yaakov, we already know. That's the women, right? We're used to the Bet Yaakovs, right? And bnei Yisrael is the men. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts with the women. To me, that doesn't sound, at first glance, to make so much sense. Primarily, the giving of the Torah. Who becomes more bound, more obligated, more chayav when Har Sinai happens? When 613 mitzvot are given to Am Yisrael, who's more responsible, has more obligations? The men. It's not even close. The men have a ton more mitzvot than women do. We come every morning, we have to come to Beit HaKnesset. Just coming to Beit HaKnesset in the morning, right, is an obligation, every man. And within that, you have Birkot HaShachar, Birkot HaTorah, you have Tzitzit, Tfilin, Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit, Kriyat Shema, all of these mitzvot. Many of them, women don't have. They're not obligated. Even Tfilah, which is a mitzvah that they actually do have, the mitzvah of Tfilah, they don't even have to pray Shema nicely. They could just say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you so much, I acknowledge you, I want to praise you. Okay, that's it. They fulfilled the mitzvah of Tfilah. That's the whole mitzvah of Tfilah for women. Bakasha, Hodaya, and Shevach. Once a person, very basic criteria. Men have many mitzvot. Mitzvot of Talmud Torah, mitzvot that pertain to many areas of halacha, whether it is mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah, whether it's mitzvah to teach the children, whether it's a mitzvah to go ahead and to spend many things that a man is obligated in. So all of these things, mitzvot taseh shezman grama, women are patur from. Except for very few exceptions, women are exempt from. So the question then becomes, why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts with the women and then goes to the men when, intuitively speaking, it should totally be the other way around? So to explain this, we have to say an incredible story. You guys don't want to stay for the story? You should stay for the story. It's a good story. Just stay for this and then you can go. You'll like it. The story is a true story that happened in America. There were two Jews that came from very religious families, very good families. And they lived in Europe, in Eastern Europe. And they came to America. This was before World War I, very, very early, like early years of the early 1900s. And, I don't know how many people are aware how bad it was. The situation was really bad in America. There wasn't, Jewry didn't exist, and social networks didn't exist, even American social networks, like welfare, Medicaid, all these other things, food stamps, WIC. They didn't have these things. There was like, you had to survive. There was about survival. And it was very difficult, particularly for Jews, because the work week was not like we're used to today. Sunday was not an off day. Well, Sunday was, but Shabbat was not an off day. It was like a regular weekday. That was changed later on, that Shabbat and Sunday became off days. But really, it was just Sunday. And that means that you must, and sometimes they didn't even have Sunday. They would work 7 days a week. So it means that a Jew would want to get off from work because of Shabbat. Almost always, they would either not take him for the job, or if he wouldn't disclose that, they would take him and fire him on Friday when he said he wasn't going to report on Shabbat. So they would work week to week finding new jobs. And it's not like today, you don't have a job, okay, there's a savings account, okay, there's networks. No. And charities, there isn't charities, you're on your own 100%. It's very easy to even starve. A person cannot have enough food, basic for himself, for his family, starve. They came to America, and Bemet, these people were tzaddikim. They were great people. So every single week, they were like, we're not giving up on Shabbat. We're going to keep Shabbat. They would go to their jobs. They would work. They would get paid for that week, and then they would be fired, and they would have to find a new job. And sometimes they would find right away, and sometimes they wouldn't. And that's how life went on. And it was difficult because that means that, A, you're not building anything because you're working for very few days, and bosses don't pay well when you only work for a few days. And it makes life hard for the whole family because you don't have jobs. Half the time of the year, you don't have a job. So they were struggling financially. The family was very hungry, not able to take care of basic expenses, living in dilapidated quarters, the whole works. Sure enough, finally, after 2 years of this on and off, they both found dream jobs where the boss said, no problem, you can take off on Shabbat, but better make sure that you work those hours and do overtime on the rest of the days. And they said, absolutely, no problem. Gladly, we'll work more hours just to be able, and they did it carefully. They were so careful. They didn't want to mess it up because they said, this is the one time, the first opportunity that he lets us off on Shabbat. We're going to make sure we do a good job. And they were very diligent and everything was great. And they were making good money and starting to live pretty comfortably. The only thing was World War I broke out. And America at some point also became part of that war. And it was wartime in America, industries change. And the boss gets up and he says, everybody must come in all days of the week, no exception. Now they said, okay, no exception, but we're going to go over to him, we're going to talk to him. They said, remember, we're Jewish, we have to keep Shabbat, we're going to be willing to work, no exceptions. Cold-hearted, absolutely no exceptions. Now this was a big hit because it's one thing when you're used to going from job to job, but they had something set. It was dream. They loved it. It wasn't so hard. They made good money, and it was a real test for them. What are you going to do? So one of the guys, family and his everything, he said, no, I'm not compromising on Shabbat. If I have to get fired, I'll get fired. No problem. And he went ahead and he got fired, and he had to struggle and figure it out. The other one, it was just too much for him. He just didn't want to go back to that lifestyle that he had, and he remembered what it means to be starving for days and having the kids crying and the wife is not able to do anything and there isn't money, there isn't food anywhere. He didn't want that kind of a lifestyle. He said, enough is enough, I can't. I'm going to work on Shabbat. Now the rabbi in America, one of the big rabbis of America at that time, he got wind that this was like the intent, that this person was not ready to quit his job and was going to be Mechalel Shabbat. So the Rav decided, I'm not going to let him do that. I'm going to go over to him and I'm going to speak to him. He can't do this. And he started talking to him. You have to know Shabbat is going to take care of you. Don't worry about it. We're going to make it. You're going to survive. But he's like, how am I going to survive? There's no charities. There's no organization. There's no Jewish community. There's barely anything. Everybody's struggling for themselves. How am I going to survive? Harav, it's pikuach nefesh. Now, pikuach nefesh means it's life endangerment. I have to work. It's a war going on. The Rav realized that there's no one to talk to. He kept yelling, pikuach nefesh, override Shabbat. The Rav says, you could do it. He doesn't want to hear. He comes back home and he tells his wife, Friday night, they do kiddush. He says, tomorrow morning, you're not going to see me. I'm going early to work. Now she hears this and inside it hurts her so much. What do you mean? We're a religious family, Torah observant, mitzvot, ma'asim. What do you mean you're going to go to work? She doesn't say a word. Nothing. Doesn't say anything. She says, okay, Shabbat meal. He goes to sleep. She goes to sleep. He goes to sleep. Midnight, she wakes up from her bed and she rushes, takes all of his clothing, all of his work clothing, and hides them in a place that he will never find them. And she goes back to sleep. Now he's sleeping, he didn't hear anything. Wakes up 6 o'clock in the morning. He's looking for his clothing to wear and to go to work. He can't find it. She's pretending she's totally asleep. Like she doesn't know what's going on, right? She's playing it innocent. But he knows his wife and he's on to her and he realized, where are my clothing? They're always here every single day. They're in the closet. What happened? He rushes to his wife and he wakes her up. He says, where's my clothes? Give me my clothing back. I know you have it. I know you hid it. I want it back now. And she says to him, absolutely not. You're not getting your clothing back at all. And I don't care if it's at the expense of my life, I'm not willing to give it up. I'm not giving you the clothing. And he was upset and he was screaming and she said, I'm not giving to you under any circumstance. And you said it's pikuach nefesh for you to go to work. So you know what? Go to work with your pajamas. In situations of pikuach nefesh, you don't make big deals out of the clothing you wear. So go. Needless to say, the man didn't go to work. He's not going to work with pajamas, right? So he stayed home that entire Shabbat. And then he realized, you know what? Maybe she's making a good point. Maybe be'emet it's not so pikuach nefesh. She caught him. She caught him. If it's pikuach nefesh, you make such calculations, pajamas, no pajama. He realized she made a valid point. She was the person that was wise enough to know how to handle the situation and address it properly. And that is the koach. The nature of a woman is to be able to do that, to be able to have that kind of thing. You can go now. That's the story. If you want to go, that's fine. I don't want to keep you here over your allowance. But Lema'aseh, for us, right? Lema'aseh, unbelievable. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kotoma lebet Yaakov etaged libnei Yisrael. First, the women. Because if you want the Torah to be preserved, you have to go to the women who are the ones that are actually in charge. And the Midrash says something amazing. How do we know that a woman is the one to build and the woman is the one to destroy a household? Because there was a story in the Gemara. The story in the Gemara goes as follows. There was a husband and wife that were married. Both of them were great tzaddikim. They were married for a number of years and they weren't able to have children. They said, what did we come into the world for? We came to bring children into the world. We're not able to have children, so let's separate and go our ways. And sure enough, they did. They got divorced. The husband married somebody, a different wife, and the wife married a different man. The husband married a woman that was a mirshat. She was evil. She wasn't a person that cared about Torah, didn't care about mitzvot. Soon enough, he became like her. And he started doing averot and sins and not keeping Torah and not keeping mitzvot. Rashad, just like she was. And the other one, that was a tzaddiket, the wife, she married a husband and she built him up and made him greater than even herself. And the Gemara says, the Midrash, from here we see that a wife is the one that builds and the wife is the one that destroys. Not only that, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when I tried this the first time, I did it differently. And look what resulted. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, This is a Midrash, it's not me saying it. The Midrash says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, He gave Adam HaRishon a mitzvah. He never told Chava, He never disclosed the mitzvah to Chava. He spoke first to Adam and let Adam report it to Chava. And what ended up resulting from that? Chava eats from the Eitz Hadat and gives from the Adam the Eitz Hadat. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the first time, I didn't start with the woman. I started with the man. And under my nose, she went ahead and caused him to violate. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure. First talk to the women, and then talk to the men. Because the woman has the power, has the capacity to be able to bring in such Kiddusha into the home. It's an incredible amount of strength and power that they have. Actually, some of the commentaries say it's very much connected to the candles of Shabbat. Because a candle represents the neshama. Now we know the Gemara tells us, when did the sin of Eitz Hadat happen? At the 10th hour, as Shabbat was coming in, meaning 2 hours before Shabbat, was when Adam HaRishon sinned and ate from the Eitz Hadat. And then they were able to tell themselves that they weren't clothed in the 11th hour, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu kicked him out in the 12th hour. But basically, everything happened in the last few hours. Now, who caused it? Who precipitated it? Chava. She was the one that extinguished the candle, B'yom ha'chorcha mimenu motamut, that Adam HaRishon now had to face death. And the neshama was essentially going to expire from this world because of her sin. So as HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, how is a woman going to fix it? Who has the mitzvah of Hadlakat Nerot Shabbat primarily? The woman. And when do you light Nerot Shabbat? On Friday. Why? She extinguished the candle of the world. Let her be the one to relight and rekindle the candle of the world. Now, how did she extinguish it? The Midrash says that when they ate from the Eitz Hadat, the Shekhinah left the world. That was the first point in time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu retreated the Shekhinah, the presence and the providence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu retreated from the world. And that essentially was restored at what point in time? Was it brought back down to the world? At the moment of Har Sinai, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving the Torah, the Shekhinah was reintroduced into the world. When did Har Sinai happen? Kule alma lo pligi, that Matan Torah was on Shabbat. That means that the restoration of the Shekhinah also happened on Shabbat, which comes out that that's the reason that a woman, when she lights Nerot Shabbat, we tell her, what is the one thing you should be careful to pray for during the lighting of Nerot Shabbat? The one thing. Women know this. Children should be Talmidei Chachamim. A person has to make sure, the wife has to make sure when she lights Nerot Shabbat to pray that her children be Talmidei Chachamim. Why specifically on the Nerot Shabbat? Because what restored the Shekhinah into the world? The giving of the Torah. And during the time that the giving of the Torah happened on Shabbat, we say at this moment when Shabbat is entering is the perfect time to pray for children to be Talmidei Chachamim, just like the Torah was given to Am Yisrael at that time. So it's incredible things about this wonderful mitzvah and why specifically it had to do with the women of Am Yisrael and not necessarily as much pertaining to the men. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.